same can be said about the other scandal that we're going to talk about today, which is Benghazi. I mean, you had Pickerring, Admiral Pickerring, on the Sunday talk shows yesterday saying just that. Saying that they didn't even bother, really, it wasn't necessary to really interview former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, the person at the top. No, they went to the underlings, and then they said, well, we found out enough information from them. This is status quo for the way that a lot of top people are protected and insulated at top positions.
But he did talk to Clinton almost to review the entire process, and if we had any questions, we would have asked. We really didn't have questions for her or for Secretary Burns. Let's listen.
We interviewed Secretary Clinton. We interviewed Deputy Secretary Burns and Deputy Secretary Knighties. We briefed them on the report. We told them where we were. It was near the end. We had plenty of opportunity, had we felt it was necessary, all 5 of us, to ask them questions. We didn't believe that was necessary, and I don't see any reason to do so now.
By the way, yesterday, Darrell Issa, who runs the House committee that had the investigation last week, he said, by the way, Hillary Clinton is not a target. President Obama is not a target. But you've got to wonder why they haven't talked to people like, for instance, National Security Advisor Tom Donilon. Tom Donilon is the guy who's really running the ship over at the White House. Where is he? And why haven't we heard from him? There he is right there.
Well, we heard from him when bin Laden was killed.
Yeah,
he
absolutely.
gave a lot of interviews. I think he shut down the documentary unit before he was still bleeding out.
Keep in mind, this guy is a former political advisor. He worked at Fannie and Freddie. In Bob Woodward's book, Obama's Wars, Robert Gates, who was the Secretary of Defense at the time, said Donilon would be a disaster as the national security advisor, and yet that is the job.
And that guy left, was told to leave.
Did you have... Go ahead, Steve. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, you know, if Bob Woodward's saying that Donilon would be a disaster as NSA advisor, and there he is, you got to wonder if his fingerprints are all over this event.
Did you happen to catch the press conference on Friday afternoon? I believe it was Friday, where Jay Carney, the spokesperson for the president, had to answer questions, really some pointed questions for the first time with regard to Benghazi and whether or not the White House had any involvement with that, specifically regarding those talking points. ABC had done a report that came out earlier in the morning that said that those talking points had been edited as much as 12 times. So is the mainstream media now going to be continuing on with this story? It appears that they may be. Here's a snippet from the Sunday shows.
Clearly, there's a credibility question that the White House has to deal with because this directly contradicts what they have said about this.
A week ago, Mr. Carney, whose usefulness to this administration is diminishing rapidly, a week ago he said Benghazi was a long time ago, as though it was the Punic Wars. Now, this is a very live issue.
And here's the thing, is Jay Carney being the fall guy here? I mean, we all know that Jay Carney is saying he's a spokesperson for the administration. He is not setting policy. And that is one thing that Tony Snow said when he went to the White House. He said, I'm really not going to take this job unless you can put me in the meetings.
Right.
I'm wondering, is Jay Carney even in these meetings? Or is he getting handed talking points because this is destroying his career? Because he is contradicted on this issue in particular 4 separate times as he downplayed what the CIA was putting into their report, what they actually came out with, who was to blame for the conclusions that proved to be faulty.
Anytime there's a question asked of Jay Carney, and it's something that they're prepared for, if you notice, he reads a card off the top of his lectern right there. He's got things he's supposed to say. He is just the mouthpiece for this administration. It's the job of the White House press corps to go ahead and ask the really tough questions. And it's interesting because people are starting to wake up in the mainstream media, thank goodness. Maureen Dowd yesterday wrote, the administration's behavior before and during the attack in Benghazi, in which 4 Americans died, was unworthy of the greatest power on earth. And there are a lot of other people in the mainstream media who have been going, wait, we kind of trusted these guys. Maybe we shouldn't have.
Well, Pickering's pushing back hard, and I'll tell you, former Secretary of Defense Gates yesterday came forward, and I think it's noteworthy. He said, if I was Secretary of Defense, I wouldn't have sent an F-16 over there because I'm afraid their shoulder-fire missiles might take him out. He said, that's why I would have held back. Number one, here's what they don't answer. How do we know it was a 9-hour attack? How many hours would it have taken for us to actually do something?
They didn't know.
So it was a 24-hour attack. Let's take it was a 2-day attack. We still wouldn't have scrambled. And by the way, to Secretary Gates, who's all the experience in the world and respected by both sides, I'll give you that. But why is it okay for those 4 guys to sit on the top of the roof of that annex building and fight for their lives, but an F-16 pilot's life would be more valuable than those 4?
I still think one of the major unanswered questions in this whole thing is why so many top-level people all had the same storyline that appears to be crumbling now.
And what the Secretary of State said to the father and mother of one of those Smiths that lost their son, we're gonna jail, put that guy, the producer that did that video, and put him in jail.
Well, it turns out it was a fabrication. The talking points were a fabrication, and each time they changed it, we got farther and farther from the truth.
All right, straight ahead.